Hello everyone, in this recording I would like to give some guidance, tips and advice on how to cope with the eclipse energy. Now we are talking about tomorrow's, because it is the 4th of May where I am, a lunar eclipse taking place in the sign of Scorpio. Now, it is not an exact, precise eclipse, but that doesn't really matter because it is very, very powerful. So, in this first part, I would just like to say a couple of words about the astrology behind it, and I'll promise not to make it very complicated. So, one of the more important aspects that it holds is an opposition to Uranus. It is quite a close, a perfect opposition. There is about 4 degree or between them, yet still with Uranus that is more than enough. And quite frankly, it is much, much safer if we can, joke about it a little bit in this way, because an exact opposition would stir up the spirit quite literally much more than it is actually doing in the present moment, because the display, the unfolding of the eclipse is already, in full swing. Yes, maybe the peak will be reached tomorrow, but of course, any lunar eclipse does have a month to actually install itself fully. So, astrologically, an eclipse is a very karmic full moon, where the light of the moon is briefly, but I do believe that this lunar eclipse not all that briefly, because it does have a longer duration. It is cut off, it is eclipsed. So the darkness is the ruling element. And of course, needless to say, that means that the veil between the worlds is especially thin. Now, another important element is that it's in the sign of Scorpio, the sign of the occult, the sign which actually has to do a lot with piercing the veil, if you know what I mean. The stinger of the Scorpio can even pierce the veil. So, Scorpio is one of those alchemical symbolisms where, the stinger along with the venom, the toxin, usually it's as above, so below. But with Scorpio, it's a massive lesson to every sentient living being that what you kind of do, let's say, in a deeper sense, emotionally, spiritually, on a soul level within yourself, is released beyond the veil. One way or another, Scorpio is an energy, a sign, an astrological symbolism, which does have to do with death, transformation, decomposition. One state ends and another one it begins, transmutation, alchemy, and of course, the higher exceptions of this: rebirth, resurrection, regeneration, mutation, and of course, evolution. But where I'm going with this is what we do here on earth many times, and what we do alchemically. Everyone, every living being's an alchemist. What we do within ourselves, especially all those elements that we have great power over and authority. Now, the fact that we give it away many times, that's, you know, another thing, but we do have it. We do have authority if we choose to have it. So this is where Scorpio has a lot to do with purges. When someone cuts off escapism, when someone faces reality in that sense, when someone undergoes massive changes, transformation. All of these elements must be mentioned because they go hand in hand with Scorpio. Thus, the eclipse and the ruling planet of Scorpio is Pluto. And Pluto just went retrograde. It is still almost at a standstill. It's not really progressing all that much, so it's very powerful and it's turning inwards. And all of us feel this. And when Pluto turns inwards, that means our own desire to have power over everything that has to do with the self, its situation, whatever depends on us, is that much stronger, greater, and we see the necessity of this. Hence, a purge. This goes hand in hand with the purge. And Pluto is in Aquarius. That means that this purge also is a strong mental one. Even the higher functions of the mind. So, whatever this eclipse brings is meant to release in a truest way, not as in a clichéic way, misaligned beliefs and really, really outdated, really old patterns, regardless. Some old patterns, some outdated elements like belief or how we manage things, how we have control over things, what kind of managers we are in certain areas of life. Now, those might be very, very strongly built on experience, logic, research, going into the depth of life to get the, idea of everything. Also, a very scorpionic energy and the reward that go with it. Those elements do serve really, really long term. Yet, an eclipse, even if those old elements truly built on hard work and a lot of scorpionic elements digging deep are solid proof, then there comes a moment, a Uranian moment, when even though they're good, even though they're brilliant, they simply are not aligned with the future. The future entered already the door. There's the saying that when the future knocks on the door, well, this is where the future is already on the sofa, comfortable, awaiting the coffee or, so the future is here. So even if whatever is ending, whatever is being released, whatever reached its final stages in our lives collectively or individually, was truly golden, was truly absolutely wonderful, delightful, meant, it truly served its purpose. Yet still, if it's ending, it is ending. And there is nothing we can do but not attach. The legend of Sedna, another dwarf planet, which also makes a very powerful key move this June and July, I do think, because it exits Taurus and enters Gemini. It dips into Gemini. And that is really, really important because Sedna's legend has it that she clung on to the boat because she was meant to be thrown into the sea and her fingers had to be cut off for her to, drown in the sea. And of course she didn't drown, she became a deity. But her ascension, in other, exceptions of this legend, perhaps the opposite of this, because in some parts she is seen as a sea monster, really, as a monstrous being full of vengeance and unforgiveness who drowns and, comes from the depth. Sedna's legend, the depth is the unconscious, the core of the unconscious. So this is where these energies are gonna rise from. So we must not do as her and cling on. We must let go. We must accept. And this is the very first thing that I would like to mention, that whatever this eclipse, shows us, because ultimately it is a revelatory energy. Yes, there is the moment of darkness, the blind, but then the light is that much stronger, the clarity. We do need a moment, perhaps, just to be lost in the void of our own minds. For example, to be in a situation where immediately there and then it's absurd in a way that there is no solution. It is just what it is, and all we can do is behold the truth, behold something that has been dished out. And that might be the eclipse, the moment that we accept, the moment that it reaches mind, heart, soul, unconscious, everything. And then comes the light. Then comes what is meant to take the place of what is ending. The previous Aries eclipse on the 20th, 19th, 20th of April was a creational North Node eclipse. Maybe that has the new within itself already. Maybe that new, karmically speaking, energetically speaking, is just awaiting to install itself. But first, in the lives of many, and I do believe even collectively, we truly need to process what this ending, what this termination, what this truth, what this emotional shock, why not, is going to be. Now, just a couple of words collectively, because collectively it's financial and it is both legal. Why legal? Because Venus and Jupiter are dancing in sextile in a precision. And Jupiter is the planet of law. So there is going to be massive leap forward and evolution in legal case, legal trials, big things that are ultimately on the world stage. And Scorpio is the result of investigation. The Scorpio is the truth, the revelation. And Scorpio is criminal energy as well. What has been done financially, money wise, interests, what was the COVID situation about? Politicians, people who have great power are going to be, exposed. And this also has like sexual scandals and secrets and coming out written all over it. And needless to say, last but not least, financially, it's a big disruptive energy. Why? Because Uranus in Taurus and the moon in Scorpio. Now, the moon is considered debilitated in the sign of Scorpio. It's not its Taurian self where it is in exaltation. Its Taurian self at the moon in Taurus, for example, song, beautiful singing, the voice of nature, the fervor of life. It is an elated feeling when we feel truly blessed to be alive. The soul is alive within our physical presence, within the physical world, within the body, nature, whatever. Now, this moon in Scorpio is the opposite of this. We are somewhere in the most arcane, secretive corners of our minds, our souls. We are very withdrawn in a secretive way, in a isolated, the soul at least. It is not very immersed in life in that sense. And an eclipse, something is shocking. Something either shocks us emotionally to the core, to where the moon in Scorpio is, it reaches even those depths. For other people, something arises from there, like Uranus in Taurus, volcano, uh, geyser, whatever, because this is Scorpio water energy. But, or when the sewage explodes, and I don't want to describe that further, but it is sewage. It is also heavy psychological energy. And I said the past, what has been done, criminal energy. And, in this sense, criminal activities are going to peak at this moment. And we can see this playing out on the world stage. But that is the domain of the moon in Scorpio, you know. But individually speaking, that is where it's a bit more important. Why? Because Pluto is in Aquarius. It's, if not equally, then a bit more important for the individual, because the individual is the component of the social, of the collective. Both are of these have simultaneously all to do with the sign of Aquarius, because it is the dichotomous and the almost paradoxical nature of Aquarius, where both exist at the same time. It doesn't matter if they're opposite, but everything has a role. So we will see this socially speaking, and some people might be affected by this. That eclipse, Scorpio financial energy. bank collapse, businesses collapse, and it has nothing to do maybe with your own individual karma as such, but you're part of the social, of the collective. And as I said, this is a time of terminations. Even if your business was your heart and soul and it worked like a charm and it was, but when karmic forces end it, and it doesn't have to be any negative reason, the clock takes Saturn. And when the clock reaches the end, it's the end. And the universe demands a reinvention, a rebirth, because nothing, you know, life sometimes it's like a song. The tune cannot be all that the same forever, the monotone. And this energy goes hand in hand with a strong, fixed cross that we are going to be having soon after the eclipse, where Pluto is squaring the north node and the south node, and then Mars will enter the sign of Cancer. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Mars is in the sign of Cancer right now, in the sign of Leo. So that's the fixed energy immediately activated. Mars will oppose Pluto, and then the square to the nodes. It's not an easy energy. It will truly demand us to break our, fixations. And that for some people is the old way of living, old way of doing things, how it always used to be. Taurus, money, material situation, finances, but it can also be psychological. This is how I used to live life. I used to get this sum of money every month and I managed. Maybe now things are changing. The money is fluctuating. You might you might have to readapt yourself to a new reality. And this can be a very heavy energy because, as I said, for some people, businesses, work, money, finances, banks are ending, are or disrupted or are put on hold. But you must not really see this as doom and gloom. What does this say about your life? Where does the reinvention lie? Because this is ultimately purgatory energy. So, not for everyone, but for many, what is ending, well, it's not good for you anymore. Even if there was a time in your life when it was, right now it just cannot continue. So the universe did you a favor. And there is an energy, as I said, of reinvention. Not just because of that Uranus, but the past solar eclipse, the North Node eclipse, and erratic in Aries, that's breakthrough, massive breakthrough. So whatever this eclipse kind of shines upon us, or it it takes away something shine forever ultimately. Where is this guiding us? Because there is solution there as well. It's not just problem. And also, this energy is not really long term. Neither is the fixed cross. Neither is Pluto, squaring the north node. Because Pluto will move into Capricorn in June, July, if I'm not mistaken, and continue its demolition. But these are the final stages. Because that is a horoscope, a different horoscope for a different time. But that means that the square will be totally different. It can still be an outer sign square if we want to look at it that way, but the energy will be total. This is where it's the most intense and the most, you know, expressive in a Plutonian way. Its intensity, it's sometimes it does feel like doom and gloom. No solution. What am I gonna do now? Did my business, my life, my love life, my marriage, my home, my materials, my income just collapse? What am I gonna do now? There can be such a side to this energy. But as I said, it can be psychological. I cannot keep on living this way, feeling this way. I cannot play this role any longer. I need to be free. There is certain truth within ourselves that we need to accept. We sometimes that acceptance may need a termination of circumstances. If you know very well that, for example, a living situation is causing you profound unhappiness, then there will come a time when you do need to seek out solutions regardless. But this can play out in so very many different ways because this is heavy psychological purge. There are truths that arise from deep within us, and we need to accept them, behold them first, of course, then accept them and do something. And it doesn't matter what they are part of us, and we cannot close them anymore. We cannot isolate them anymore like a tumor, because if something is not expelled, and no matter how hard you try, that means it's part of you and it's there to stay. And alchemizing doesn't necessarily mean elimination. Because in the modern spiritual culture, perhaps this is the common misbelief where everything we need to operate out, remove, terminate. No, 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 no. Some things, especially certain darker things, more twisted things, more, why not perverted things, transgressive things that are not going anywhere despite our efforts, are there to be alchemized, but that doesn't mean to be removed and bye bye, to be understood, and for us to do something more sacred with them. And sometimes, like just containment, we're not living in the Middle Ages anymore. We need to alchemize, truly transform them. And that is what this eclipse might represent for some people. The transformation, transmutation, integration. And that means in tarot, Pluto is the judgment card. Exactly removing our own judgment from certain things in our lives, in other people's lives. And this is where do our obsessions guide us? What do they speak to us about? The self, of course, because something that, for example, we hate obsessively, we dislike, we oppose, it just doesn't give us any rest. Usually, that very same core of the idea is also within us, but we condemned it, we alchemized it already, but still the very idea of it echoes deep within our beings. And this eclipse terminates those situations when we understand what the case is, what the situation is, and we find it easier to understand others. Of course, this energy can be sexual as well because that is the nature of Scorpio. And whatever comes to the surface, this is where it's really to be accepted or sometimes released. Certain, sexual elements do alchemize themselves after they're lived out, or they surface one way or another. This is where we need to be wise and exactly hold the right balance, so we give our beings freedom, but at the same time we must always make sure that freedom will never ever do any kind of harm. Exactly the energy of Scorpio. So what to contain and what to live out, the alchemy. uh, but of course this is also the domain of deep traumas, deep hurts, and the deepest and darkest feelings, where jealousy, envy, greed, obsessive energies of any kind are exactly the domain of the moon in Scorpio. And we must remember this is being eclipsed. So there is a moment when a pattern truly reaches its end stages, where the jealousy has to end, and understanding, forgiveness, or a confrontation, or anything that can change deep within us can truly end certain toxic feelings, toxic situations. But when it comes to trauma, accepting the fact that many times it is us who are basically being attached almost obsessively to the victimhood, to the role of the victim, that many times it's so very important to the shadow, because that gives a gravity, that gives a reason to exist, that is also a permanent vengeance. And we do not see it as vengeance because justice is not done, but exactly when justice is never being done, and the being passively being more than content with it, that is an inner vengeance. And this eclipse brings exactly those situations to the surface where the inner victim, well, if we look at it from a different lens, a Uranian lens, that's the best thing that ever happened to the person, or sometimes all of us have this pattern. So even me, even you, everyone, all of us are victims in our own way in something. And many times we do not see it, we do not process it, we do not observe it, we don't even get feedback as how can we, yet the victim is the best thing that happened to us, and we treasure it and we love it. But these are so hidden even from the self, the guiltiest kind of contentment, if not, I'm not sure which words to use here, but they're only very rarely do we get mirrors in life, such an eclipse, where we see how happy we are by, embodying the role of the victim. And the times in life when we see it even more clearly is when that victimhood ends. We terminate it for any reason, and we no longer think, do anything, react as a victim, and we think back to ourselves how much easier life or anything, was when I was a victim. You know what I mean? And that's when we catch on that we cannot allow ourselves to support the victim more than it has to be supported. But the opposite of this is also true. There are people who simply can never, ever, ever accept that they were a victim of something, and the denial of that, and being strong, and being resilient, and not letting it get to you, and haha, the humor and what we mutated into, because that is already mutation, that will not do anyone any favor, not to the self, not to anyone else. Because not being truthful with the self is not being truthful to other people. Because if we deny that we were a victim of something, even the unconscious of other people will be oblivious to it. Because many things in life, and this is also an element of the eclipse, are not conscious. All A lot. I don't want to say a percentage here because I don't have the exact numbers. It would be just a guess. But a lot that we do and we interact, and most of our relationships are really unconscious. The two unconscious elements converse with each other. Our consciousnesses converse in one way, in a mercurial way, and our unconscious in a totally different way. This is where some people are best friends but big enemies, really, because their unconsciouses are not friends. Their conscious is, and their friendship is very meaningful, yet the troubles that they get into together, well, are exactly the result because their unconsciouses challenge each other. Like two dogs who tolerate each other, but that doesn't mean they're the best of friends when they're way too close. You know what I mean? So there is also what is within the unconscious, because certain truth, certain feelings, certain emotions are perceived only by other people. Other people's unconsciouses, like antennas. And if we deny something to our own being, they won't know that it's there. And the unconscious usually does show more, and I'm just thinking how to word this, a more gentle side when the unconscious of another is screaming that I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim. You know what I mean? It will usually try and stay away because it doesn't want to anger it or scare it, even just like animals. When there is a wounded animal yapping, well, except scavengers, other animals usually kind of stay away because they understand instinctually that pain is pain. So does the unconscious function as well. But if the yapping or no sign of wounding is there, then how is it supposed to know? And what that means, that a lot of events and unfolding of events are magnetized by the unconscious. So of course life will be 10 times harder because the unconscious will not know that for you it's very important to be a little bit easier. It will not know because you deny it. You deny it and it will deny it as well. And it will attract challenges, but tough challenges, like not easy mode, hardcore mode, because there is that energy of denial. And such an eclipse usually brings this to the surface, where you have to admit that you need to be in easy mode. And there's a lot of other energy in the sky which promotes this. Saturn in Pisces. This is where you have to take it easy, especially if usually you're very, very scorpionic with yourself. Or, very Virgo like in a sense. Why Virgo like? Mercury retrograde. So we are a lot of, you know, mental patterns that we just do in a fixed way are going to be visible at this time because there was a Mercury conjunct Sun, and then Mercury also is trying to sextile Saturn. So take it easy. Have a rest. Be tolerant, be acceptive. And this is where Jupiter sextile Venus don't have double standards when it comes to the self. Just try to, you know, balance things out as best as you can. And this is where we need to accept exactly whatever this eclipse, whatever feelings, whatever deep emotions this eclipse pulls to the surface. Because acceptance is owning it. And when we own it, the other eclipse can kick in. The previous eclipse, the solar eclipse, the solution comes, the breakthrough comes. You kind of feel a totally different way, or after you admitted something to yourself or others or whatever shocking emotional outburst there was in your life, you or someone else or a situation, after that, you just feel different. You're more than okay with it. Perhaps shame, guilt, the suspicion, the scorpionic element of the mind, after being confronted with whatever that was, it just ceases. So you feel like a different you when it comes to that situation. So that can also be a very powerful healing side, regeneration side, resurrective side of this energy. Or still, for some people, something that perhaps might have been terminated by a different scorpionic expression, put on halt, blocked, boxed in, totally cemented, where it was buried for good, but it was something good, something creative, something alchemical in a good way, but it was simply shot away from you, your life, you using it. And maybe this eclipse, like an earthquake, like a tsunami, the cementing or whatever the blockage is gone. And you find yourself more whole than ever because a past part of you is reactivated and it's alive and it has intentions, it has dreams, it has purposes. It can basically shock you back to a more whole and complete version of you. So whatever this eclipse is terminating, whatever heavy energies might be on the surface, you must remember it with Saturn in Pisces. It is really right now a choice how we look at it. Because if we look at it as just the ending, just the doom and gloom, if we just passively integrate the darkness of it, the darkness side of the eclipse, then of course we're not doing anyone any favor, Jupiter, misusing that Jupiter. But if we try to approach it, but knowing that there is something deeper, something that awaits us, something that will greet us on the other side of acceptance, of course, then we're basically inviting the energies of the solar eclipse to quantum leap, to gallop into our lives and bring us something new, even if that is just an inner feeling or initiative or the desire for a breakthrough. At this moment, that can be the big difference. The attitude is so very important here, and ultimately faith. We must know that there is a divine plan there, Saturn in the sign of Pisces. And this is where exactly Saturn time may not be linear. It can come miraculously, or perhaps adversity or danger can be delayed a very long time. So this can serve us in all the best ways as long as we have the right attitude towards this. So at this moment, I do believe that the best thing that we can do is really stay in acceptance and embody our own spiritual stability, if that makes sense. So I do hope that this helped you. Thank you so much for being here. And the upcoming videos are gonna be voice only because I just moved and I don't really have internet yet. So thank you so much for understanding and really sorry about this. So thank you again for being here. Until next time, bye for now.